Hey, I'm Jason, and what you're about to watch is a recording from a weekly group that I run called the Sleight of Mouth Dojo. It's basically a group of us who already have some training in sleight of mouth, and we meet each week to practice this wonderful art form. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating, which is how to spot and work with frames in a conversation. You know those moments when you're talking with somebody and you both seem to be seeing the same situation differently? This often has to do with how the situation is being framed. In this session of the dojo, you'll learn how to identify frames, and we also actually explore what a frame is made of. And then we practice shifting negative frames in ways that create better connection and understanding and better relationships. We also explore the difference between reframing content versus reframing context. And this is such an important skill to have. You need to know the difference. So we're going to dive into that. Plus, you'll see how we practice avoiding getting stuck in what I would call frame wars, where two people are just butting heads with each other. So this is the kind of deep dive practice that we do every week in our dojo. We meet online on Zoom. And if you're somebody who already has some pretty deep sleight of mouth training and you'd like to join us, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll set up a call with you and talk about it. Okay, in the meantime, please enjoy the recording. Well, I guess we can transition then to frames. What is a frame? We're
It's a
looking at.
container. It's the container, the context for delivering a key message.
Yeah, it is the context of the situation under which an interaction is happening. So it has key players, it has key, uh, highlights or lighting situations that will be there. So it's the overall interaction that's happening within that context, within that those conditions.
Mhm.
And at least in my mind, when we talk about reframing it, it's like, can you change that so that let's say, for example, the main actor isn't the main actor anymore. Oh, we didn't realize that that person in the background actually is the most important character here. Or as you say, shine the light a different way or a black light a different way. That this part of the frame wasn't visible, but now it is. And it
Right,
was always
right.
part of the interaction.
If someone looked at Tom Cruise and said, Tom Cruise gets so many parts because he's such a talented actor, good for him. That's one frame. Another person could say, well, yeah, Tom Cruise gets a lot of parts. His father owns a production studio. And now that changes how you see his success. That, by the way, this is not true, of course, about Tom Cruise. I mean, he's consistently like him, and there are some actors like who just consistently keep doing good stuff. Like him and Matt Dillon is one of them. I think of they all kind of got their start in The Outsiders. Y'all ever see that Outsiders?
Yes.
All
Yeah.
of them in one movie. It was amazing. So in Sleight of Mouth, one definition is that a frame is the context or perspective through which a person interprets and makes meaning of their experience.
I like that one.
Oh,
Very
very
clear.
concise. Like that's the AI definition. So it's like a mental lens that shapes how someone sees and understands a situation. I mean, basically, like the core idea here is that our experience of reality is shaped not by just the events that happen to us, but like also by our interpretation. And a lot of people, their path of personal growth is about changing the content of their lives. But if you have a disempowering frame, new content will be perceived in old ways, including perhaps a lack of appreciation. And we didn't really dive into this in Sleight of Mouth, but there's basically two kinds of reframing, right? So there's content reframing and context reframing. What do you think content reframing is?
I would think content reframing is the content of the interaction remains the same, but you create a different perception of it or
hmm
interpretation of it.
Content, yeah, just remaining in the content. For me, I'm directly thinking about the redefining. Um,
Mm,
and
yeah, it's not this, it's
is
that.
yeah, it is a very good example of content reframing. And I'm also thinking about some other patterns are very good for context reframing.
Totally. So
So
yeah, here's AI's definition. It's in the chat if you want to copy and paste it. It's when you change the meaning of an event or a thing that happened to you, an instance, or by altering the content or context in which you view it. So like you're viewing failure as not a defeat, but a learning opportunity. So but you're reorienting the meaning of the thing. the thing that happened. So context reframing is different. What do you think context reframing is?
An example I can think of is another outcome. Well, a hierarchy of criteria. So in the light of this value that you have, what that belief would mean when being put together with this value that you pursue. So it's like shining another light that was not the person in front was not aware before.
Yeah.
Any
I
other
would say
takers?
context reframing is you take the same interaction and put in a different context and see how that contrasts. So, it's great to be, really forceful, aggressive in a boxing match, but you don't want to do that when you're having a casual conversation with a friend. So
Right.
that same behavior would be very wrong in that context. So you can't apply the same interaction everywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, and what's
Mhm.
interesting, and just to point out what, sort of the substructure of what Lilith's saying, it implies that there's value to the thing that could be perceived as negative in one context, the aggression in
Oh,
this case, right? And
right.
that's super important. I think for me, it has been, is like I see what you're doing. It doesn't work in this situation, but I can see like why you do it and why it's valuable in other parts of life. It's
Mm,
interesting. I've often used the Christian metaphor of angels and demons. Like sometimes people who show up in your life and cause abrasion and difficulty and challenge, they are an angel wearing a demon mask because they're designed to provoke something in you. And then once the change happens, then they can take off the mask, a
it
definition for
happens in
context.
many folk stories. So
Yeah,
it's like archetypical stuff, whatever. S-
yeah.
it-
I wish it were more taught directly. Like I think people have this intuitive understanding of it, but like I would love the idea of framing to be taught more like directly in these thought systems.
uh, and also one more thing about, and I don't know if it's content or context. It and it goes back to if you approach life with, life is the cosmos is working with me versus the cosmos is constantly against me. Because somebody can say something to you and you hear all the bad words and you don't really hear the good things that they said.
Well, that goes right into the classic NLP distinction that are part of our brains do a million different things, but for our purposes in NLP, the brain distorts, deletes, and generalizes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is such an important thing to know and to be able to spot it, because then you can then delete the examples that disprove, your existing belief. And it's such a deep, amazing realization. So here's the definition of context reframing, which is it involves taking a behavior that's problematic in one context and finding a situation where the same behavior could be a resource. And the example here is, being stubborn can be seen as a problem in a team environment, but when it comes to, but it might be a strength when someone needs to stand their ground on important issues.
Mm-hmm. It's
Let's,
also and I talk with people with ADHD because manifestations of ADHD can be a hindrance or can be a gift. Like impulsivity can be spontaneity. So that's a context.
oh God, that makes me need to like show you guys something. I'm not going to show the whole video. This was probably before some of your time. This was like one of the older, like viral videos that was out there. And this video is an interesting thing to look at through the lens of framing. It's called the Wayseer's Manifesto. Has anyone ever seen this?
No, wow, maybe not.
It's interesting. It's an interesting artistic creation. Let's take a look. I'll play like 3 minutes of it.
Attention all you rule breakers, you misfits and troublemakers, all you free spirits and pioneers, all you visionaries and nonconformists. Everything the establishment has told you is wrong with you is actually what's right with you. You see things others don't. You are hardwired to change the world. Unlike 9 out of 10 people, your mind is irrepressible, and this threatens authority. You were born to be a revolutionary. You can it's dangerous to the establishment, and it wants them eliminated. So your whole life you've been told your strengths were weaknesses. Now I'm telling you otherwise. Your impulsivity is a gift. Impulses are your key to the miraculous. Your distractibility is an artifact of your inspired creativity. Your mood swings reflect the natural pulse of life. They give you unstoppable energy when you're high, and deep soulful insight when you're low. Been diagnosed with a disorder? That's society's latest way to deny its own illness by pointing the finger at you. Your addictive personality is just a symptom of your vast, underused capacity for heroic creative expression and spiritual connection. Your utter lack of repression, your wide-eyed idealism, your unmitigated open mind. Didn't anyone ever tell you? These are the traits shared by the greatest pioneers and visionaries, innovators, revolutionaries, procrastinators, and drama queens, activists on the social scene, space cadets, and mavericks, philosophers, and derelicts, business suits, flying fighter jets, football stars, and sex addicts, celebrities with ADD, alcoholics who seek novelty, first responders, prophets and saints, mystics, and change agents. We are all the same, you know, 'cause we're all affected by the way. We are all the same, you know, 'cause we're all attracted to the flame.
So it's a, beautiful piece of work. It's all reframes.
Beautiful. I've
It's-
never
it's
heard of it. I love it.
10 minutes of reframes, basically telling you what's wrong with you is what's right with you.
I love it.
So let's practice. Let's do some, sleight of mouth is about conversational reframing, but sometimes it's good to just, without all the added structure of sleight of mouth, it's good to just be able to identify frames. And here's a basic statement. Speaking loudly means you're trying to intimidate me. So what's being implied here?
The volume is a form of aggression.
Rejection towards loudness, easily being intimidated.
That it's intentionally, I mean, there is a thought behind it. It's an intentionally,
Yeah.
it could be just the person is excited and passionate, or
That's a super important thing to pause on, because when someone's framing you, they're often framing your intent,
Right.
and that is important. Like, they're not just framing what the content means of what you said, they're framing your intent behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I think in this case, they're framing the intent behind it. The factual statement they may be making, which may be useful to look at, is they're feeling intimidated.
Mhm.
And rather than saying, I'm feeling intimidated, they're saying, you're intimidating me. So
Yeah.
sometimes
Well,
it's
they're
valuable to actually
also-
just pause and ask, are you feeling intimidated by me?
they're also looking at it with their own filter, because maybe their abusive father was loud.
So in sleight of mouth, then it would probably be wise to be like, well, what do you mean? What does intimidation mean to you? How do you know when someone's intimidating you?
Right,
And then unpack the definitions and
right.
ingredients that their definition is made up of.
I would also add maybe a good idea to honor what they've just said, that, oh no. And then what does intimidation mean to you? Because if they're already feeling intimidated, if you ask in a certain way, it might make it worse. So it wouldn't hurt to say, oh, sorry about that. Well,
And
then,
that brings up a good point, which is you probably couldn't ask the first question, the typical first sleight of mouth meta model question, which is, well, how do you know I'm intimidating you?
yeah.
'Cause they're not going to be able to answer it. So, okay, what do you do in that situation? What would you say?
I'd make sure I was in rapport, and then I would say, oh, that was not my intention. I'm curious. I'd like to know what intimidation is for you, or what does it mean? Something like that. And I might even change my voice. Hopefully I would.
Yeah, the calibration back to rapport.
Mhm.
Like, usually I'll say something like, because I get that from people. I've had a number of people say you're too intimidating, and I will back off and I'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's the New Jersey upbringing. we're born, we come out of the womb with sharp teeth, you know, try to make humor out of it. This is such an important thing to realize, like framing is connected oftentimes to intent. Like
Yeah.
that's an ingredient that a frame is often made of, in addition to the content. So, okay, so then what else could speaking loudly mean? So this is a good question to ask. Like, well, what else, what is being implied? What else could it mean for identifying frames?
It means the person doesn't have a good understanding of how loud they are. Just
Okay,
emotional
yeah.
and loud. Yeah, and they may be hard of hearing, so they may be overcompensating.
Well, one thing in anything on the autism spectrum, if people talk very loudly, they're not aware of it, and it's very hard to manage.
I've
But
seen that,
also, it could be the person is just really excited and passionate.
Being excited, being passionate about what I'm trying to say, or I'm just a typical bold person. That's my habit of speaking loud. Or maybe I work on senior care with senior people, and I am used, but out of profession, I'm used to speak loud so people can hear me.
What if one of my absolute like favorite little mental tricks is inverse thinking. Like instead of saying, how can I lose 10 pounds by the summer? It's like, what could I do to make sure that I definitely will stay the same weight by the summer?
Oh,
You know,
yes.
so you just, and then it highlights something you're doing currently that's causing the problem, right? So what if we flip it and say the person who was talking loudly is the one who feels like the victim here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what could
I
that
was
mean?
actually thinking of that. Maybe they're feeling dismissed or unheard, and
Yes.
that's where the volume is going up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that, and then we get, so redefine would be, it's not that I'm trying to intimidate you, it's that I feel frustrated because I've told you the same thing 3 times now and you're not listening, and I don't feel like I'm being heard. And so you're focusing on the loudness of my voice and missing completely that you're dismissive.
Yeah.
That's a
But
tough reframe because you're
let the frame
reframing.
wars begin.
Yeah, that's a frame war. That's taking one intention and flipping it to another negative intention.
Yeah,
That you're
yeah, and that's a
intentionally
good,
dismissing me.
that's
Yeah.
a really important point. A lot of arguments are about, you know, you have the bad intention. So how do you get out of it? By framing more toward positive intent. It's so interesting. Like, you know, you have the negative intent. No, you have the negative intent, and then trying to get the other person to agree. No, okay, yeah, I was the one with the negative intent. That's tough.
That's my default habit, and it has never worked. Trying
Yeah.
to point the other person out with the negative intent.
Oh,
I think it's much more useful to say that's what I'm feeling, like the I statements. I'm feeling frustrated because I feel dismissed. And if that's not happening, that's great, but that's how I'm feeling. Can we start again so you don't feel that I'm shouting and I don't feel I'm being dismissed?
yeah.
So here's to show you the value of one word changing. Here's like two different possible things to say, right, in the chat. Oh, sorry, I was talking loudly because you versus I was talking loudly because I.
Love
That
it.
one word can, it's like the hinge that swings the door,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
whether
Yeah.
the door stays open or whether the door closes. So let's practice this one. Like, so how would you fill in the first one? I'm sorry, I was talking loudly because you,
You didn't hear me.
yeah,
You did not understand.
yeah, because you were, I was talking loudly because you know, you were smacking away my arguments as if they had no value.
Or you keep interrupting
Well,
me. You keep jumping into my sentences.
Yeah, so I was talking loudly because you keep stepping on me.
I was talking loudly because you seem to be shutting me out with your body language.
Oh, and
Mm.
that could make the person aware, like, oh, all right, my arms are crossed.
I was
I
talking
was
loudly
talk.
because you raised the voice on me first.
Mm.
No, I didn't.
I was talking loudly because you were not listening. You were looking at your phone.
Ooh,
Mm.
oh, I love this.
You were multitasking.
I
Yeah.
was talking loudly because you don't seem to get it. And this is like the third time I've talked with you about this in the last few days. And so I'm trying to make sure you hear me this time.
Mm. Yeah.
How about the second one? Sorry, I was talking loudly because I wasn't feeling heard.
It creates an opening.
I wasn't. Oh, Sorry, I was talking loudly because I feel like I didn't get your attention.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Because I'm very touched and moved and passionate about that.
Or like, what if you just add a little bit of history? I'm sorry, I was talking loudly because in my family, I had to talk loudly in order to be heard.
I grew up with 10 siblings.
Yeah, there you go. I had to compete for attention.
Sorry, I was talking loudly because I felt like I have to match up to your volume.
Mm. So this is okay. So this is content reframing. This is changing the meaning of talking loudly.
Okay.
So now let's try context reframing. So what's another context where talking loudly makes sense that would help me to understand why you do it? Oh, sorry. I'm so used to talking with my mom who's in the senior center and she doesn't like wearing her hearing aids, so I have to really project to be heard half the time.
That's a good one. It's habit. Yeah. I've worked in a factory where it's very noisy. So unfortunately, I talk loudly. It's just a habit.
Well,
I know people like that. They talk loudly.
sorry, I was talking loudly. I have some hearing loss, and so sometimes I don't know how loud I'm actually being. Man, I have just a quick story. So like when I was living in Ukraine, I met this pickup artist guy named Steve. And like Steve would go to the weekly meetup where like all the single people would go. So like it's a meat market kind of this place. And I just went there with my friends. I was not interested in dating. And so I was often the guy who would gather up friends and say, let's go out to eat afterwards. And so I did that. We went to an Indian restaurant. It was like 12 of us. And Steve was trained in how to pick up women in nightclubs. So he's trained to like do super volume, like the nightclub
Oh,
volume.
right.
And we're all sitting at the dinner table and he's like talking at club volume and like everyone's looking at him like, dude. And he couldn't, I told him like 3 times and he still couldn't hear it. Like he just immediately went back into it. So Steve and I didn't get along very well.
I wonder what would have happened if you'd taken your hand and put it on his forearm and said, we're not in a club anymore or something,
I
just
tried
tactile.
something like that, it just, he was all about like getting the attention of all the women. And the funny thing with Steve is I remember one night we were at this because this thing happened every Friday, this meetup thing. And I like to go in there to meet new people. And I was watching Steve one night and he was walking around with his leather pants and he's talking to all these women and someone was taking a picture of him. He's like, oh my God, look at us. We look like we're a couple already. Trying to he's trying to frame it like, oh wow, we look so good together. And he seemed like so lonely the way he was moving about, like kind of desperate. And then I suddenly realized like I have had 7 interesting, beautiful women around me for the entire night that are my friends. And like I think I'm doing something right, that I have like I not just women, I have guys too, like cool people who have stayed with me for the whole night. And I suddenly got this appreciation. And like remember in the beginning we talked about appreciation of blessings. I
Mm-hmm.
just had this appreciation for the path I chose,
Oh, definitely.
of friendship first, make your social life into a garden, not go out and hunt for food, but make a garden that other people want to come and be in. Okay, so going back to speaking loudly means you're trying to intimidate me. Let's come up with some contexts. Like, oh, sorry, I was talking loudly because and then fill it in, but change contexts. Where else does this work?
Would hearing loss be part of it? Because I would think,
Yeah,
yeah, because I have hearing loss and
yeah.
Because there are a lot of distractions around and I have ADHD.
There you go.
Because
Yeah.
I'm around with kids a lot, and how the volume I speak directly speaks of the seriousness of I am.
What's that?
Like the same thing with I talk around kids a lot, and then if I don't talk loudly, they never hear me. So I've
Mm.
developed a habit of talking loudly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, so maybe to help someone shift out of an undesirable behavior, it might be helpful to help them see where else in life that behavior was working for them,
Mm.
so that they don't lose face, so they don't feel like an idiot. Okay, let's shift to a different frame example. So let's say you ask someone for a raise, right? And they're dependent on you. Like, look at this. Let's say it's a startup and your role is like you can't be replaced easily. So here's one frame, which is you're only asking me for a raise because you know I need you right now and you're taking advantage of my situation.
You damn right.
Well, what does this frame imply?
Extortion, selfishness,
Well,
or
it also implies that you're not worth me paying you that much.
Ooh,
It's
yeah.
just a situational thing.
oh yeah, the other way. Okay,
Oh,
got it.
interesting. Yeah, I was thinking more like the intent of the person, but yeah, that you're not worth it as well as the other one. And what does it imply about their intent?
Then yeah, it is extortion because
Oh,
if they were asking, if the intent is, hey, I'm worth more and I want to be receiving more, that's it, you know, then I wouldn't say you're only asking for this because I need you. It's
mm-hmm.
also, yeah, then it implies that they're unjustly asking you for something
Mm-hmm.
because
So
you're in a
unjust
bind.
is, yeah. And then, let the frame wars begin, right? It could turn into, well, actually, I've been talking to a recruiter, and it turns out that your three biggest competitors all pay 50% more than you're paying. And I didn't
Right.
realize that when you hired me. Now, what
Mhm.
does that imply about the intent of the employer?
That they are very shrewd and
Hmm.
careful, and
Trying to
That
get
they
cheap
were
labor,
exploiting them to
taking
begin with.
Well,
advantage.
the interesting thing is you used an I statement there because I found out and I didn't realize when you hired me. So the intent is actually softer. It's just
Hmm.
saying, I didn't realize it. Maybe you didn't realize it,
Hmm.
but you have not been paying and you don't pay equal wages. That would be now an intent that you're actually cheating people
Yeah.
out of
Well, so that's
money.
such an important piece is to insert, maybe you don't realize it, but here's how
Mhm.
much other companies pay, as opposed to other people are paying this much. What's wrong with you? So what's going to happen here depends on the skill of the person who's doing the framing
Exactly. Exactly. I
and
get
what
that.
you're aware of and what your intent is. If your tendency is to do combat versus collaborate, that there's a come from here. And I think that's an important ingredient in framing is your come from.
Okay.
Are you assuming collaboration and positive intent, or are you assuming, you're getting the short end of the stick and you're going to make them see it?
I think you can do very well, even if that were the case, for you to play dumb and assume
Hmm.
collaboration and go from there.
Yeah,
It's better.
yeah. You can say, well, in the year that I worked here, I totally improved my skills. I've learned a lot from you, with you, whatever. Um, so yeah. So what I'm now providing in my job is a lot more than I used to.
Well, so let's practice the content reframes. So no, I'm asking for a raise because let's redefine what asking for a raise means.
I remember actually having this conversation and multiple layers apply. Like I remember one answer is, no, I'm asking for this raise because for the last 2 years I've already been working at a level that's higher than my title. So I'm already delivering, and I've proven my worth,
Hmm. Hmm.
and the raise just needs to catch up.
So that's content, right? Is it content? I
Yeah.
guess, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
a context, I think this is a context is what you were paying me made absolute sense for a beginning person in this role,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right.
entry
Mm-hmm.
level role.
Mm-hmm.
I've since taken 4 college classes, taken a management class. I've led projects that have made you tons of money, and so I'm worth more now. Just like
Yeah.
here's a metaphor. Just like if you buy a house and you spend $50,000 to improve it, you have the right to charge more money for rent because the
Good.
house is worth more,
Mm-hmm. More comfortable. More
as
comfortable.
compared to the houses around it,
Mm-hmm.
as compared to the market. So it implies like the person didn't do anything wrong by paying you that rate, which then lets them save face
Mm-hmm.
and creates an opening for them to see you asking for a raise in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to put it on myself is to say, well, from the job, I didn't realize that how much the job actually required over what initially I thought it was. So that's kind of, it's on me.
I'm
Yeah.
asking for a raise because I'm overworking. I'm working extra hours than initially
Right,
agreed
right.
upon.
Yeah, or
Or
I'm asked to do things that were not clear at the beginning that would be my responsibility or something like that. I'm
Right. So that
sorry.
gets into scope, right? Any freelancer knows what scope creep is. Okay, so like landing the plane here, questions or statements that tend to set a negative frame, you're just doing that because is going to lead to negative framing. And also, don't you realize that blank?
Mm.
Don't you realize that I need you in this company and you leaving is going to put me out, and make things worse? Why would you choose now to ask for a raise? It's just going to lead to negative framing. And then some magic questions that I think can be helpful is number one is if you were to assume the best about me and assume that I have positive intentions, what else could it mean? That could help steer you toward a positive frame that for content, and then is there another situation where what I'm doing that's upsetting you might make sense? This is good for if you ask a client that, is there another situation where I understand that you were argumentative with your mom? Is there another situation where what you were doing, how you were being with her?
I think the first one is really good. The second one is useful if you're talking about somebody else, not about yourself. Because to me, it also sounds like I want you to do the work of figuring out how this is positive. Can you suggest how this could be a positive? Then I'll agree with you.
What I
Unless
mean
it's
is,
dealing with a child.
yeah, what I mean is if you're a coach and you're talking to a client,
Mm.
be like, I hear that you've got this thing where you've been argumentative. Let's see if we can understand where this comes from, because we assume that all behaviors have a positive intent. So where has
Mhm.
being argumentative really served you in your life?
Mm.
And so then you're finding the context.
Like
Yeah.
being a lawyer, defending a case, can be
Totally.
very, very, being a
Growing,
journalist,
growing up with
investigating.
unreasonable people.
Yep. It's called survival.
For me, this is what I've done to change myself, is I've gone from being less argumentative, but I still hold on to the skill of maintaining my frame and not letting my frame collapse under someone else's push. Because there are people who try to sweep the legs. That doesn't mean I'm always right. I'm obviously not always right, but that the skill of holding your frame when you're trying to offer something
Mhm.
is valuable without needing to argue. So let's land the plane, and what's a takeaway from today? What was meaningful about today for you?
I like the idea of looking at context and content and playing with that, and then being able to take these different sleight of mouth patterns and seeing how I can apply them. So thank you.
I like the differentiation between context and content and how they sometimes the lines are a little bit merged, or it's both.
Hmm.
And then also looking at the subtlety of where the frame war is starting to happen, as opposed to solution that in trying to flip the frame, do you get into a frame war versus do you get into a collaborative approach?
Yeah, same for me. Like just the distinction of a frame war starts oftentimes with making mutual negative assumptions about each other's intent. Like just knowing that is useful. Like
Right.
what, okay, because then you can
Well,
be like, well, what am I saying about their intent? And how can I reframe this to assume positive intent and try and get in their world a little bit?
I've encountered frame wars happening right within the conversation. Like somebody says something, well, this is why I was doing it. And instead of and that can create a new frame, which is like, oh, so you always do this to everyone else? Or, you know, well, actually, no, it's not just me. Five other people have told me you behave this way. And a whole new frame war starts with that. That now you've framed it as like, oh, it's not just with me. No, we don't have to solve something. You have to solve something with five other people too now.
Right.
And it's a very different, yeah.
Well, it creates
It doesn't get anywhere.
there's something wrong with you and everybody sees it kind
Yeah.
of, thing. So what else? What was meaningful about today for you, QJ and then Leora?
For me, every single session, I enjoyed picking up some of your values. Interesting to say that someone who is more advanced in the personal development in on this path, and some of your values are just helpful for me to observe and contemplate myself. I really enjoyed learning, yeah, the framework war instead of changing the framework towards something that's more collaborative and mutually enhancing. But more specifically, reframing, sorry, I'm doing something because of you instead of sorry, I'm doing something because I. That subtle change of wording is very practical in my daily life.
Yeah, it's amazing what a difference one word can make. Like I have learned starting statements with I goes a long way towards
Yeah.
setting boundaries, toward coming to agreement,
Yeah.
Leora, what?
And sorry, one little thing. All of these are techniques, and there's a fuel behind it, which is the spirit, which is the self-enhancement, the maturing and growth.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot really make meaningful utilization of these techniques without the strong growth of self.
Well, I just I was looking at Facebook earlier, and they posted a memory that I posted, and it's a quote from Seneca. It says, "I judge you unfortunate because you've never lived through misfortune. You have passed through life without an opponent, so no one can ever know what you're capable of, not even you." So it's people who trigger us, they're a chance for us to determine our greatest I am consciousness.
I like a discussion about the intention because in DI and looking at microaggression or something, there is always differentiating between intention and impact. And if the person just said, "Well, I didn't mean to, I didn't," that's not good enough. It's like so taking responsibility and thinking in advance. My intention is good, and let's see what my impact may be.
That's a really important part of maturing, distinguishing intent from impact. Truly. Okay, let's say goodbye for now then. And cool. Yeah, thanks
Thank
everybody.
you very much.
This was a good one. See you
That
next
was
week.
a very good one. Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Hey again. You made it to the end. Congratulations. I hope you learned something valuable about framing, including what kind of things make up a frame that someone believes or buys into. A big thing to watch out for is how the person is framing intent. That is such a big deal. I've learned that it is so much easier to maintain rapport with another person when I come from a place where I assume that their intent is positive, even when it feels like it isn't at first. Then remember, the frames that you come up with are limited by what you are aware of. I want to say that again. The way you frame something, the frame that you come up with, it's limited by what you are aware of regarding the situation or regarding what the other person is going through. Oftentimes there is some little piece of context that you're not aware of, the knowing of which could change everything in terms of how you're framing something. One example that I've used a lot is imagine this, okay? Imagine you're driving down the highway and some jerk in a red sports car flies by you and he's weaving in and out of traffic lanes, driving unsafely. And then you look over and you see a cop car speeding by in hot pursuit. He's going after him, right? So you're like, yes, justice. And then a few minutes later, you see both the red sports car and the cop car pulled over on the side of the road. And you're thinking, oh, good, they got the jerk. I hope they take his license. Well, imagine that just as you're driving by, you see the guy who was driving the sports car, and he gets out of the car and he's carrying his 6-year-old daughter whose arm is hanging down limp and hanging there lifelessly. In that moment, when you realize why that guy was driving that way, knowing that his child's life might be depending on how fast he gets to the hospital, suddenly that behavior seems more reasonable, doesn't it? So here's the thing. The truth was always out there in this case. He was always going to the hospital, but nobody else knew that but him. And this is what happens in life. We frame people in a negative way and judge them while having very little context for their behavior. If we just had a little bit more information, what we might experience is compassion, not judgment. And this is why in Sleight of Mouth, we use carefully crafted questions to help extract that missing information. And this is how we can gently dissolve a limiting perspective. It's how we can help someone integrate and remove a limiting belief that's keeping them stuck. And of course, my personal favorite use of Sleight of Mouth is helping to expand someone's perspective. I don't necessarily want to try and take away the way someone thinks or even try to change someone's perspective unless it's harming others, so much as I want to help them see a constellation of perspectives that each contain truth And it really depends on what you're aware of. Like, think of one perspective is that you're looking up in the sky and you see one star in the sky. Now, when you can have multiple perspectives at the same time, it's like looking up and seeing a constellation. The constellation being a bigger unit, a bigger body that's made up of these individual stars, these individual perspectives, these individual meanings. I hope you found this useful. Again, if you already have training in sleight of mouth and you want to be part of a practice dojo, then please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you are interested in learning more about sleight of mouth, the guy that I learned from was Doug O'Brien, and his website is sleightoffmouth.org. And of course, there's always the books by Robert Dilts, who is the original creator of sleight of mouth, and I absolutely recommend you go that path as well. So thanks again for watching, and take care. I hope you found this useful.